So you've probably seen the headlines. They're pretty intense, right? We're talking military strikes involving the US, Israel, and Iran, and some people are throwing around a very heavy word, Armageddon. What is actually going on here? Is this really the end of the world, or is it something else? Let's get into it and figure it out.
So why is everyone so on edge right now? Well, it's because this whole situation blew up incredibly fast. We're talking about major strikes, high-level officials being targeted, up to 48 reported killed. And Iran, they didn't just sit back. They fired back with their own missiles and drones. Then you have the confirmation of US military casualties, and suddenly the stakes are just stratospherically high. Make no mistake, this is one of the most serious escalations we've seen in the region in a long, long time.
And all of that intensity, that sheer speed, brings us to the big dramatic question we're tackling today. Could this actually be the beginning of Armageddon? I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, but you have to admit, when things get this chaotic, it's a question that starts to pop into your head.
Okay, but before we can even begin to answer a question that big, we have to do something really important. We've got to define our terms. What does Armageddon actually mean? Because let's be honest, it's a word we hear all the time, especially when things get scary. It's a way to try and make sense of the chaos, right? But its original meaning is super specific. So, let's separate the prophecy from the panic.
All right, so if you go back to the source, the biblical book of Revelation, Armageddon isn't just another big war. No way. It is the final, cataclysmic, world-ending battle. We're talking about the ultimate showdown between good and evil that literally brings about the end of time. The stakes don't get any higher, they're cosmic.
And right there, that's where all the confusion comes from. You've got two totally different meanings floating around. On one hand, you have the original prophetic idea, a divine world-ending event. But on the other hand, we have the way we use it today, basically as a shorthand for any really big destructive war. Getting the difference between these two is absolutely crucial if we're going to look at what's happening now with a clear head.
So how do we do that? How do we analyze this without getting swept up in the panic? Well, let's get methodical. We're going to use what I'm calling the apocalypse checklist. It's basically 4 key conditions that have to be met for something to be considered a literal, honest-to-goodness Armageddon.
All right, here's our checklist. Let's run through it. First up, global involvement. We're not talking about a regional spat. We mean pretty much every major world power is actively in the fight. Second, widespread destruction. The scale here is planetary. Think nuclear war, that level of global catastrophe. Third on the list, systemic collapse. This means a complete and total breakdown of, well, everything. Governments, economies, global society. And last, number 4, prophetic fulfillment. The conflict has to tick the boxes of a specific divine plan that signals the end times. Got it? 4 big conditions.
Okay, we've got our checklist. It's time to put it to the test. Let's take the current conflict and see how it actually stacks up against these 4 criteria. Let's go down the list one by one. Number 1, global involvement. Is it happening? Nope. This is intense for sure, but it's still primarily a regional conflict. It hasn't pulled in all the major world powers. Okay, number 2, widespread destruction. The damage is severe, absolutely, but it is not worldwide. So that's a no. How about number 3, systemic collapse? Are global systems stable? Yes, they are. They're definitely feeling the stress, but they haven't collapsed. And finally, number 4, prophetic fulfillment. Is there any clear sign this is fulfilling a specific prophecy? Again, no. There's just no indication of that.
So what's the verdict? When you actually use this framework and look at the facts, the answer is really clear. This situation is dangerous. It's incredibly serious. But is it the literal biblical Armageddon? By definition, no, it's not. Okay, deep breath. So, it's not Armageddon. But, and this is a really big but, just because it's not the end of the world doesn't mean we can all relax. Not at all, far from it. So if it's not Armageddon, what is the real danger we're facing? The best way to think about this is as a dangerous escalation point. That's the key phrase. It's one of those critical moments in history where a regional fight has the very real and frankly terrifying potential to spin out of control and become something much, much bigger. Here's a great way to picture it. The whole situation is like a giant powder keg. The Middle East, with all its complex politics, rivalries, and old tensions, that's the powder keg. And these recent strikes, that's the spark.
So the real danger here isn't some ancient prophecy coming true. It's that one little spark could set the whole thing off and ignite a massive, devastating war across the entire region.
But here's the good news, or at least the hopeful news. The fuse hasn't been completely lit yet. There are a lot of people working like crazy to stop this from blowing up. You've got world leaders calling for everyone to take a step back. There's a ton of frantic, behind-the-scenes diplomacy happening, and a real push for countries to work together to cool things down. To stick with our analogy, the fire brigade is on the scene, trying to put out the spark.
So let's be clear, this isn't Armageddon, but it is a major global flashpoint. Right now, the entire world is kind of holding its breath, just watching and waiting to see if diplomacy and restraint can put out that dangerous spark before the whole thing goes up in flames. And that leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Will they succeed?